Hi, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and this is the Probox2X and the Remote Plus. Probox2X is a small box that you can plug into a TV to run Android applications on a big screen, and the Remote Plus is a wireless remote control that's designed to work with it. It has media buttons, some gamepad buttons, air mouse functionality, and a microphone. And we'll get more into that in a moment, and it's really one of the things that I think makes this device special. We've seen a number of Android-based TV boxes like this over the last couple of years, and this is one of the more powerful ones. It has a quad-core ARM Cortex-A9 processor, support for 4K video. It's an Amlogic S802H CPU, 2 gigs of RAM, 16 gigs of storage, and it's not the fastest device I've ever tested, but it's definitely reasonably fast, scores well in benchmarks, and I haven't found any apps that it won't run. And it works pretty well for streaming media, although the user interface is still not exactly perfect for getting Netflix, YouTube, and other sorts of videos on your TV. In terms of expansion ports, we've got 2 full-size USB ports that are both in use. I'll tell you why in a moment. Micro SD card slot, micro USB OTG cable, power, Ethernet, AV jacks, HDMI and SPDIF, and you can see that there's an external antenna for Wi-Fi performance. Under the case there are some vents here, so it gets a little bit warm during use, but not particularly hot, because those are sort of positioned in such a way to let the air out. Now let's take a look here at the user interface. You can see that while it's running Android, it has this UI that's really designed to be used with a remote control, which is nice for the most part. When you get into certain applications, like say the Google Play Store, there are certain functions that can be a little bit tricky to perform when you're just using this. So for instance, if I wanted to open up the menu, it sort of works, but then I lost my place, and let's go back in there again. So installing apps and other things can be a little tricky unless you use the air mouse functionality. This becomes more of a problem with some apps than others, but say I want to use the search box, I can then go ahead and search using the on-screen keyboard, which again can be a little bit difficult. And that's the reason why I mentioned I've got 2 items plugged in here, in addition to this Probox2 Remote Plus, which I can use for functions like pulling down the notification tray and so forth. I've got this keyboard, which has a trackball and buttons. And so now I can type more easily and navigate using a mouse slightly more easily than just using the air mouse. There are certain things like surfing the web that I think are just going to be a lot easier to use with a keyboard and mouse when you're using something like this, which really was designed for... Oops. It's an operating system that was really designed for phones and tablets. Now Google is going to be releasing Android TV software in the future, which is a version of Google Android that's really optimized for TVs. It's not entirely clear at this point if that will be available to Chinese manufacturers or other device makers, but it should make it a little bit easier to navigate certain apps. Now when we look at the user interface, again, it's running Android under the hood, and if we sort of go into the settings, we can see that. Pull down the notification tray, go to settings, and we've got what looks like the regular Android settings menu, and you can see that we're running Android 4.4 KitKat. But for the most part, if things work properly, what you're going to see is this more TV-friendly user interface that lets you do things like load XBMC Media Center, which comes preloaded, or view all of your applications, or go into different categories. And you can customize which apps show up in these categories. It's got built-in support for this Media Center application, which includes a DLNA player, so that we can, for instance, browse for music, pictures, videos that are on our home network, and it works pretty well with those items. Let's go back one. We can go to the YouTube player, and I'll show you how it works with video playback here. So again, now I'm going to enable air mouse functionality, because navigating with just the buttons can be a little tricky. So YouTube works pretty nicely. I haven't had any trouble playing video from any sites that I've tried, so Streaming video works nice. And you can also install third-party applications such as Cheapcast, which is an app that lets the Probox2 X act sort of like a Chromecast. So I can bring up my phone, find a video on my phone, and send it straight to the TV, and that also works just fine. Now, what about gaming? That's one of the things I think really makes this guy stand out because of the Remote Plus. As it turns out, though, when you try Asphalt A, Riptide GP2, and some other games that would really benefit from using a remote, they automatically recognize the remote, but they expect shoulder buttons and other buttons that just aren't here. And so I find it a little bit tricky to play. They might expect the up and down buttons to be in this position instead of this position, and you can't brake, or you can't reverse, or you can't do certain other things because there just aren't enough buttons. That said, there are some games that work pretty well anyway. So let's go ahead and show you a few of those. One game that I've had some luck here with is Rayman Jungle Run. And it actually works best when you're using the air mouse functionality, which I need to enable here, because what we can do, and the sound is off here, normally it would make some sound, but you might have a hard time hearing me if we did that. It's a simple sort of tap style game, so all you need to do is tap the screen to play, because it's always trying to move forward. So this game, which was really designed for touchscreens, works just fine, because all you need is a single button as you play. So certain Android games like that are going to work perfectly well. Let's take another game which works with the remote control mode. This is Wind Up Night. And turn off the air mouse. And this time it works well because it recognizes the remote control, but we've got some up and down arrow issues, but it recognizes the remote control and it uses only the buttons that we've got, as far as I can tell. So we've got the A button and the X button, and we're on level 2 here. Oops. And it wants us to use X. A, X, A, X. So this game actually plays really well with its remote controls. When you can find the titles that are supported, it works nicely. You can also plug in the USB dongle for this remote and use it with a Windows computer if you wanted to. It's not going to necessarily recognize all of the features, but you have the arrow keys, the mute keys, and so forth. It's really designed for use with Android, but it can work with just about anything as long as you've got the correct drivers for it. But as a gamepad, it's of limited functionality. It feels okay. The air mouse works reasonably well. The buttons work reasonably well. But like I said, with certain games, it just doesn't. It expects you to have more buttons than you do. So it's something that helps set this Android TV box apart from some others. Is it enough to justify the combined price of $150 for the remote and the Probox2 X? That's sort of for you to decide at a time when you can get, say, Amazon Fire TV and a more Xbox-style game controller for that. I guess where devices like the Probox2 X might win is the fact that they're a little bit more versatile. This device comes pre-rooted. You can install any applications you want, but what you get is a user interface that's sort of tacked on top of the touchscreen version of Android for phones and tablets. So overall, it's a nice enough device, but if you're going to get a device for running, specifically for doing things like running Netflix or YouTube or Hulu Plus on your TV, you might want to get a device that has TV-friendly user interfaces for those instead of sort of more of a smartphone-style user interface, and that you need to sort of wave or remote around in order to navigate, find your videos, play, pause, and so forth. You can see there are no play or pause buttons, for instance, on this remote control, something that you would get with a Roku or lots of other devices. So as a versatile box, it's a nice setup. As a specifically media-centric device, or even a device for gaming, leaves a little bit to be desired. It does what it does well when you can find the apps that it does it well with, which is a kind of tongue twister that I'm not going to bother saying 5 times fast. This is Brad Linder with Liliputing. You can find more details at liliputing.com.